Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Indigenous Stewardship webinar. We'll be discussing how Indigenous fire stewardship is driving innovation. You'll hear from amazing panelists, Joel Adams from the Kalispel Tribe of Indians, who's the Fuels Management Specialist, Brian Wallace, Executive Director of Indigenous Future Society, Matthew Moore, Program Executive with the Indigenous Future Society, and Pedro Martinez of Biomasa. He is the Fire Management Consultant. Um, if you all want to drop in the chat where you all are stringing in from today, that would be great. This is an international webinar. We'll be discussing how the Fire Grand Challenge innovators are developing and applying new technologies to support Indigenous stewardship, and we'll highlight how innovation, data, and traditional knowledge come together to strengthen community-led approaches to fire management. We'll Following this, you'll hear from my colleague Liam Torpy about the challenge, where we're at. We are pretty far in the challenge, finishing up soon with the field testing. And our presenters have some presentations, and we'll have a wonderful panel exchange. Then we'll follow up with a Q&A session, so feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and we'll bring them up to the panelists as time allows. Thanks so much. I'll pass it over to Liam.
Thanks, Caressa. And thanks to everyone who's joining us. I'm just watching the chat right now for who's here, and there's some seriously heavy hitters in the crowd. So please introduce each other, connect with each other. I'm really excited for the conversations that can come out of this as well. And so we've got a quick presentation for you just to give you a little bit of background on the challenge. And so I'm going to go pretty fast through the slides. I think if you're a regular webinar attendee with CXL, you'll have seen some of these slides. I'm going to go fast because you're not here to listen to me, here to listen to our amazing panelists. So welcome to our webinar on how Indigenous fire stewardship is driving innovation. And so to give a little bit of background on CXL, Conservation X Labs, where Caressa and I are working, Conservation X Labs is a nonprofit focused on conservation technology and innovation. And so over our 10-year history, we've supported about 165 different innovations. Those innovations have gone on to raise $570 million, and a lot of them reach scale. And we've worked across 69 different countries. Our most recent open innovation initiative is the Fire Grand Challenge. And so we started designing it about 3.5 years ago, and we launched it last August in 2024. And so it was designed to be a program to support new solutions to destructive fire that bring together Indigenous, rural, and place-based knowledge with different types of technologies. And so it was designed for 3 different global hotspots and launched in Western North America last August. And really the point of the challenge is to try to empower innovators and communities and really drive solutions that work at the community and landscape level. And so to give a little bit more detail on what this timeline looks like, you can see we launched last August. We had an open application period for about 4 months. We solicited applications with these new types of innovations, and then also applications from communities who could help co-test and field test and co-develop the innovations themselves. And so we had that matchmaking process back in February where different technology developers came together with different communities, whether they were tribal nations or First Nations, municipalities, WUI communities, neighborhood associations, and they formed teams that then applied to the finalist phase. And so over the last 9 months, we've had 12 finalist teams, each given $50,000 to field test in conjunction together, both the technological provider and developer, and then the partner community. And so we've been running a series of workshops for them focused on product development, market validation. There's been a lot of collaboration amongst the teams themselves, and we're leading up to a final event in January, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So there's been a huge partner community behind this. We've had the finalist cohort as well. So we've been building a broader community of practice around this idea of bringing together these 2 different spheres of innovation within the fire sector. To talk a little bit about what does that cohort look like, you're going to hear from a few of the different finalists today, and they can talk about their work much more eloquently than I can. But as you can see, the cohort, it brings a lot of diversity in a lot of different dimensions. And so we've got innovations that are being field tested up in northern BC, up in Canada, and the subboreal, where you have catastrophic fires that can get up to 1 million hectares, and then a very different ecology all the way down in Chiapas, Mexico. And you're going to hear from Pedro with their work with the International Savanna Fire Management Initiative. And so we've got a swath of different ecosystems. There's lots of different backgrounds of the people involved, lots of different regional and place-based knowledge. And so it's been really cool to see how the innovators have all worked together to try out these new solutions and see how they can really attack different elements of this larger fire crisis that we're in. And so one more chart just to show a little bit more of that diversity of the finalists. We have people working on the risk assessment and planning phase, figuring out how do you really figure out how to move up to the landscape level, decrease the fuel loads, increase prescribed and cultural burning. We have people working to work on that biomass utilization question, others working on decreasing ignitions from power lines and lightning, others working to do fire control both in the prescribed burning context and cultural burning context, and then also on active wildfires. And then we also have post-fire restoration. And these innovations, they work across these different columns. It's nowhere near as neat as these individual 4 categories. But as you can see, it's really a portfolio of solutions that works on different elements of the issue. And so the last thing I'll leave you with before we pass to our finalists is we are building up towards the final grand prize ceremony and a larger celebration of innovation and this cross interchange of knowledge within these different spheres of knowledge. And so we are hosting an event in January 27th in Oakland, California. We are going to be providing more details on that coming up. It is a private event, but you are esteemed colleagues and peers out there in the audience. You can scan that QR code. We're going to put a link in the chat as well, and you can request to join the event. And so we'd love to see many of you there. And once again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for supporting the challenge as a partner or from afar. And if there's any way that you think you can collaborate with ourselves or the innovators, please reach out and we'd be happy to put you in touch or to help you out in any way that we can. And so I'll pass back to Caressa for the introductions.
Thank you for that, Liam. I actually forgot to introduce myself. Machiktas kanawiyasa Krasnuan mayon ayonako. Hi everyone, my name is Krasnuan. I am the community outreach lead with Conservation X Labs. I've had the great privilege of working with many of the partner communities and innovator teams, including the communities who we are hearing from today. Joel Adams is the fuel manager. First, I think we'll be hearing from who wants to go first, actually. Um, Joel, do you feel comfortable going first? Or Pedro?
Fairly flexible. I'll do whatever. Yep.
Okay, we'll hear from Pedro first. He has prepared a beautiful presentation. Pedro is a fire management consultant with Biomasa from Chiapas, Mexico, and he will be presenting in Spanish, and we have a translator for attendees who would. And then we will be hearing from Joel Adams from the Kalispel Tribes. He's the fuels management specialist. And following that, we'll be hearing from both Brian Wallace and Matthew Moore from the Indigenous Future Society. So we can, Pedro, could you share your
Señor Pedro, ¿podría por favor compartir su presentación? ¿Podría compartir su pantalla?
Yo la comparto.
Okay. Carmen is going to share the screen right now.
Ok, empiezo.
Should I start?
Bien, si me permiten, empiezo, Carmen.
If I may, can I start, Carmen?
Por supuesto que sí, Pedro.
Ok. El actual proyecto que desarrollamos con la Iniciativa Internacional para el Manejo del Fuego es el manejo, se le llama este proyecto, manejo tradicional del fuego para la reducción de emisiones.
So this
Y
project
bueno,
is called Señor Pedro, un momento, necesito un momento para poder traducirle. Si pudiera hacer frases cortas, ¿sí? Okay, so this project is called Traditional Handling for Fire and the Reduction of Emissions. Adelante, por favor.
Hay tres actores importantes, principales, que es la Iniciativa Internacional de Manejo del Fuego Biomasa y la CONAFOR, que es la instancia que regula el manejo del fuego en México.
So there are two instances. We have Biomasa and CONAFOR, which is the instance that regulates the handling of fires here in Mexico.
La siguiente, por favor.
Next, please.
Bien, el modelo de biomasa, la anterior, el modelo de
The
biomasa,
previous one, please.
la anterior, la siguiente,
No,
perdón,
next.
antes de esta, ay, esa mega, gracias. El modelo de biomasa integra el conocimiento tradicional de la indígena, como el uso técnico del fuego y la ciencia moderna. Y
So
bueno,
the
él sí.
Biomasa model integrates the traditional knowledge of indigenous community regarding fire and also uses modern science.
Bien, a través de la integración de estos tres conocimientos, hemos desarrollado investigación aplicada que nos está sirviendo para fortalecer las capacidades locales de esta zona.
Through the integration of this knowledge, we are applying all of these researches to strengthen the capacities in all these areas.
En este sentido, hemos realizado quemas prescritas experimentales que nos han servido como aulas volantes para fortalecer precisamente el conocimiento comunitario en manejo del fuego.
In this sense, we've used the experimental prescribed fires that has allows us to increase our knowledge in this fire issue.
La siguiente, por favor.
Next, please.
Gracias.
you.
Son panorámicas que muestran la tendencia de capacitación que hemos realizado en este proceso. En un año, más o menos, capacitamos a 50 combatientes de pueblos originarios.
So these are some images where we are showing the trend on the training we have done in these areas. In the course of 1 year, we've trained more than 50 people from originary indigenous communities.
Ok, los temas más elementales que tocamos fueron que ellos sepan medir comportamiento del fuego, hacer inventario de combustibles, dentro de ello medir emisiones, severidad del fuego, entre otros elementos del comportamiento del fuego.
So one of the most elemental topics we addressed in these trainings were fire behavior and the inventory of fuel.
Y principalmente enseñarles que fortalezcan los procedimientos para la seguridad, ya sea cuando combaten incendios o realizan quemas prescritas o quemas culturales.
And mainly, we encourage them to strengthen procedures like when they do some cultural fires or when they are actually fighting a current fire.
La siguiente, por favor.
Next, please.
Bien, este es un centro comunitario de manejo del fuego, que es la plataforma para impulsar la participación comunitaria y para desarrollar el manejo indígena del fuego.
So this is a community center. We use this platform to encourage the community participation in the handling of this kind of issues.
Con esta estrategia pretendemos fortalecer la participación de la participación de pueblos indígenas y la intervención de las mujeres.
With these initiatives, we are looking for strengthening the participation of the indigenous people, especially women.
También pretendemos incrementar la participación de jóvenes relacionados con el manejo del fuego para
also-
que se dé
Perdón, sí.
continuidad a ese relevo intergeneracional.
So we also want to increase the participation of young people in fire management, so we can have a new generation of people that can handle these type of issues.
A través de esta estrategia también estamos fortaleciendo la participación de productores adultos, es decir, las gentes más con mayor edad que tienen mayor sabiduría en el uso comunitario del fuego.
And we are also, with this strategy, we are strengthening the participation of the elders because they are the ones that have most more experience managing fires.
También desarrollamos con este centro comunitario un programa comunitario de quemas prescritas, donde pretendemos sumar el conocimiento cultural o tradicional, el conocimiento técnico y la ciencia moderna.
We also developed a community program for scheduled fires when we want to bring together cultural knowledge, traditional knowledge, technology, and modern science.
Bueno, y en el tiempo, este centro nos va a servir como un centro de capacitación comunitaria a través de una metodología de escuelas de campo, donde las quemas prescritas le vamos a aprovechar esa utilidad pedagógica que tienen.
And with time, we're going to use these centers as community training centers where we are going to be able to use these scheduled fires for educational purposes.
En este centro comunitario también estamos fortaleciendo el aprendizaje para la aplicación del sistema de comando de incidentes para mejorar la organización comunitaria.
In this community center, we are also strengthening the learning of this incident community center because we want to encourage everyone to be able to learn about this.
Y bueno, se establecen diversos procedimientos para que realicen las brigadas comunitarias la prevención, la supresión y la ejecución de quemas prescritas.
And we also established many procedures like prevention, suppression, and also having scheduled fires.
Son otras diversas acciones que se desarrollan en este centro comunitario, donde se da un liderazgo de las brigadas indígenas, pero con el acompañamiento de especialistas de las diferentes instituciones.
We are also taking into consideration many other actions, but we are really looking forward to including leadership from the indigenous brigades, but also we want to encourage the participation of specialists.
Sin embargo, se ha hecho un estudio introductorio de percepción del uso del fuego y se ha identificado que existe una erosión cultural derivado por la migración que actualmente existe aquí en esta zona.
We've identified that there is a cultural erosion that is going on in this area because of all the migration that is taking place in this area.
Entonces, este fenómeno está afectando los modos de vida de la gente indígena, así como sus prácticas culturales con el uso del fuego y diversas formas de cómo colaborar en la protección de sus recursos naturales.
So this phenomenon is having an impact in the livelihoods of the indigenous people that live here and how they use fire for their cultural purposes.
Gracias. La siguiente, por favor.
Next, please.
Pedro, tenemos unos 2 minutitos adicionales, ¿sí?
Pedro, we have
Ok.
2 more minutes.
Bien, el primero es una figura organizativa, esta es otra. Es la primera que expliqué, es más operativa. Este es un consejo comunitario donde participan autoridades de 15 comunidades ejidales.
Okay, so this is a community council where 15 different authorities of different communities can participate.
Y esta estrategia de organización es para mejorar la gobernanza territorial comunitaria como una estrategia para fortalecer el manejo comunitario del fuego.
So this is strategies in order to improve the community territorial governance in order to improve the managing of fires.
Entonces, su objetivo principal es generar espacios, facilitar y acompañar procesos de capacitación, intercambio de experiencia y fortalecer la organización comunitaria.
And its objective is to generate spaces to facilitate trainings in order to improve the community governance.
Todo lo anterior para mejorar la gestión del manejo del fuego.
All this to improve fire management.
Ok, entonces en esta figura, en esta lámina, se establece todos los acuerdos, se planifica para que en el centro comunitario, lo que expliqué anteriormente, se opere todo lo que se acuerde en este espacio.
So in this image, we can see that where all the agreements will be established in order for them to be executed in the community centers I just mentioned in the previous slides.
Gracias a la siguiente.
Next, please.
Bueno, todo lo que hacemos en manejo del fuego, existe un marco legal para ello y particularmente tomamos en cuenta la norma 015, norma oficial mexicana que regula el uso del fuego en México.
So all we do regarding fire management, it's under a legal framework, specifically the Regulation 015. This is specifically for Mexico.
Entonces, esta es la principal herramienta para planificar y gestionar el uso del fuego en todos sus niveles aquí en México.
This is the main tool to plan and manage fire management in all its levels here in Mexico.
Gracias. La siguiente.
Thank you. Next one.
Bueno, producto de todo el proceso de manejo del fuego que hacemos, hay varios productos. Uno de ellos es este instructivo de quemas prescritas.
So because of all the work we've done, we have some products, and this is one of them. This is a scheduled fire program.
Entre otros usos y ventajas que tiene esta publicación que se ha generado localmente, está sirviendo para apoyar la enseñanza, aprendizaje académica en los niveles de licenciatura y posgrado.
Okay, so one of the advantages of this is that this is being used to support academic learning.
La siguiente.
Next, please.
Bueno, este es también otro resultado de los trabajos que hemos hecho, es un manual de restauración. Y bueno, aquí este manual describe de qué manera el fuego beneficia la restauración natural y bajo qué condiciones es necesario restaurar.
This is a restoration manual. It specifies what restoration is and also under which conditions it's necessary to restore.
Lo anterior, considerando la respuesta natural de los ecosistemas, su resiliencia y la sucesión vegetal.
All of this considering the vegetal succession and the ecosystems they live in.
La siguiente, por favor.
Next, please.
Muchas gracias, Pedro. Pienso que tenemos que mover a la siguiente introducción, pero muchas gracias por tu trabajo y estamos muy
Gracias.
emocionados para oír más de eso durante la conversación más tarde. I think now we will be passing to Joel Adams from the Kalispel tribe. Gracias otra vez, Pedro.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the presentation, Pedro. My name is Joel Adams. I work here currently with the Kalispel Tribe of Indians here in Northeast Washington State. My partner company is Vibrant Planet, and we are the partner community. we got involved with Vibrant Planet at the start of the Fire Grant Challenge. Um, Initially, Vibrant Planet was hired by the Bureau of Indian Affairs here in the North West. So they approached, well, I think the Bureau of Indian Affairs approached Vibrant Planet to see about using their platform to see how they can be used to identify and reduce fuels on the landscape. So if you look at fuels on the landscape at a land base, or the data that they were utilizing is the forest vegetation simulator data. So it's all accessible through the internet. So they basically took that data and was able to lay that over the Kalispel Reservation. In the Northwest region, the Kalispel tribe is one of the smaller reservations in the Northwest region under the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And I think that would kind of keyed us into being in the forefront of either continue working with Vibrant Planet from the Bureau standpoint as contracting. Um, so I was approached by the Bureau of Indian Affairs if we were curious if the Kalispel tribe wanted to go ahead and be the first testers and or um, partnering up with Vibrant Planet on a one-on-one basis to kind of run their um, technology platform over the Kalispel Reservation. So if you look at the Kalispel Reservation, we are again Northeast Washington. We're 1 mile wide by 11 miles long. We're a small reservation. Again, we're along a river, the Pend Oreille River. So thinking of that being kind of on the flat ground before we hit the slope and the mountains, we're wet. So when they do severity maps across the reservation, they make everything look green, meaning there's no risk or severity issues. However, us locally being here, we know that is untrue. So it would be basically somebody running data over the reservation from another part of the world and telling us what our risk and severity is. The nice thing about Vibrant Planet was able to use the FES data to kind of key in on high risk areas. So the red areas versus the green areas, which the Bureau sent me a map years ago showing the Kalispel Reservation as all green because we are next to the river. However, we have the constant battle with trying to reduce the brush and the other ladder fuels across the reservation. And so using the Vibrant Planet platform allowed us to put in some inputs. Let's say we want to look at um, thinning brush, or we want to kind of key in on structures. So they kind of call these SARAs. So you put in, depending on what you want to address, and then it will, then you can put in, let's say, I want to look at 10 100-acre polygons and see how they lay out depending on fire risk severity. And so it will say, this polygon is your first one, highest risk. And if you do certain, let's say we want to masticate or we want to hand thin with chainsaws, or depending on how we want to apply on the landscape, will give you, let's say, the biggest bang for your dollar. So, and then with having 10 of those, we can actually plan years out. So as my funding comes in from the national level to do fuels work, that's kind of how we plan. We plan 3 years out. So it would be 26, 7, and 2028. And that's how we have to plan our funding coming in. And that's the great thing about the Vibrant Planet platform, is that you can put in inputs, look at risk level, and then plan a map of treatment work to follow the maps or not. I think the flexibility of the platform allowed us to really play around with um, different inputs and different treatment applications. And it also allows a dollar amount of what that might look like. So moving forward with cultural burning is a hot topic here in the States about how non red carded NWCG qualified firefighters can put fire on the ground, that we can not only meet the approval of our tribal councils, but also meet the approval of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So we may be on a reservation. However, that land does belong to the federal government. So we are under the federal rules and regulations. So that's why for myself, it's all got to be um, under the legal standpoint of being red carded. So when I do fire, I got to do a 21 element burn plan. My funding comes from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and there's a lot of legal stuff to make a fire happen. However, if the cultural burners are doing it, and or nowadays the state certified burners program for states like Washington and Oregon and others are trying to be able to get more people that are landowners to be able to do more prescribed fire as well, and to have a little more um, accountability to those that are putting fire on the ground, not only legally through the federal government, the state government, and like the cultural burners. Um, uh, I would like to say, and again, I know just trying to save some time here, that working with Vibrant Planet has really shed a lot of light on technology, what we can do moving forward, laying a map over the Kalispell Reservation with a lot of polygons that we can look at different acreage, different treatments, different applications, almost like the fire vegetation simulator. You could run insects through there, you could run fire through there. Um, and as well as maybe promoting this to the other tribes in the Northwest region, because all the tribes in the Northwest region don't have fire programs or trying to do other things with fire moving forward. Um, so pretty excited what has come of this last year working with Vibrant Planet, and appreciate the CXL staff and the Fire Grand Challenge.
Thank you so much, Joel. Really appreciate all that information. And now we'll pass to Brian Wallace and Matthew Moore at the Indigenous Futures Society.
Ngamaheshi Degandila Brian Wallace, CEO of the Indigenous Futures Society. And so just introducing myself, and then my colleague and relative, Matt Moore, here with me, joining. If I can, I'll briefly just run through the high level for this, quick setup of what we're doing. And then Mr. Moore will be able to kind of fill in all the details on the operational applications of our project and what's happening on the ground. I'm Nisan Ananwasho, and we're from representing the Indigenous Futures Society, which is an organization that was once formerly the Sierra Fund, but was transitioned into Indigenous governing leadership and staff leadership earlier this year, primarily following up on a conversation we've been having here in the Sierra Nevada bioregion over the last 3 years about exploring the promise of Indigenous guardianship models, and then championing the rights of nature standing of the Sierra bioregion and the watersheds that we're connected to here. The Sierra Nevada bioregion is the mountain range that sits between the Great Basin in the Western United States and the Pacific Coast in California. The tribes that we work with in this area are about 5 or 6 basic cultural groups and linguistic groups, all kind of related through water and watershed on both sides of the Sierra Nevada. And so the groups that we work with are a collection of about 44 federally recognized tribes and about 42 unrecognized communities. And that just has something to do with the legal standing and political status of tribes here in the United States. But basically, our model is to demonstrate Indigenous-led technology adoption and data sovereignty models for this community. And so the transition of this entity into an indigenous-led organization represents a fundamental shift in our area, where we're looking at technology serving indigenous communities rather than extracting from them. And so we initially started out in our last presentation before this group. Again, thank you CXL for supporting the work and this effort and this movement. We were engaged in a partnership with the First Nations Emergency Service Society out of British Columbia, and we are working in partnership with exploring the development of decision support tools and knowledge transfer to California tribal communities here in the Sierra bioregion through this partnership on decision support around emergency preparedness and fire mitigation, and then maybe down the road some predictive analytics about wildfire behavior and activities in our area. The partnership has since, moved from working with Finesse, and we've been working on creating these workspaces through this partnership, and then transferring them down from Canadian servers and workspaces into U.S. Controlled and directed workspaces and servers here within Indigenous Future Society platforms. And so we're now kind of finishing the migration of the data from Canadian servers to under U.S. tribal governance control here with our group. And the innovation highlight, I think, where we're at right now is we're customizing forms for integrating traditional ecological knowledge with wildfire management data as well. And so the whole idea is to integrate beyond cultural wisdom and knowledge into the wildfire effort, but also look at a broader expansion of these technologies and these applications into cultural restoration, food sovereignty spaces, cultural burning support, and integrating with other GIS platforms that tribes have an interest in and managing, and then most importantly, focusing on local control and data sovereignty protocols and guidances for these communities that have total control over their data and these technologies that we're working to co-develop with them. In particular, I got to mention our partner community is the Washoe Tribe of Nevada, California. Their homeland is centering around Lake Tahoe in the Central Sierra, of which, and I'm also a member of the tribe, so it works out rather well in terms of, kind of working on the homelands that we're really familiar with. And the idea is to support the tribe and the community in putting wisdom and cultural prayer and ceremony back on the forest lands and into the watersheds that we're so connected with, and to reestablish these relationships so we can get elders and younger members back out on the forest and working together on revitalizing these watersheds and reconnecting them with them, and then revitalizing our language restoration efforts, and then a lot of this knowledge has been resident. It didn't disappear. It's just that, we're now giving an environment and a space where we can kind of connect our efforts with technology and use these tools to further the cultural sovereignty and regenerative sovereignty of the tribal communities that we're working with. In specific, the Washoe Tribe leadership is demonstrating how cultural fire restoration and catastrophic fire preparedness can coexist. They're actively bringing back cultural fire into the Tahoe Basin, and just recently were funded about $3.5 million from the state of California for cultural burning practices based on the partnership that we're working with. And they're developing an Washoe Fire Risk Assessment forms with our team to integrate tech with modern metrics, basically doing our best to measure what really counts culturally. And then we're consolidating data from 5 other tribes into this Ops-Ready platform. Our Finesse partnership started out with a Lightship technology, which was actually a space that was created for emergency preparedness and community readiness. And has since then, Lightship was acquired by Ops-Ready, which is more in the industrial workspace and a more heavy industrial kind of workplace management and budgeting and on. So the transition of this relationship is really working with us, but it also creates us a lesson that we want to transfer. And I know we'll get into this discussion about transferable experiences and things that we learn from this, but just how important it is that to create focusing on platform independence and not be so dependent on vendor dependence. And that's something that Joel's talked about, and also Pedro as well, is that we're creating our own tools, using our own knowledge, and is being directed by our own wisdom and our own cultural bearers, and then it's to benefit future generations and people we haven't met yet. So this is really, really good work. And And where we're looking to expand this, and I'll wrap it up right now, is that the future work that we have is we just completed a mapping workshop at our summit in October up in Lake Tahoe with the Washoe Tribe and our partners, 5 other tribes in the Sierra Barra region. And we're going to expand in the cultural site mapping. We're going to be doing food sovereignty mapping, and then, as I mentioned earlier, integrating with existing GIS platforms and applying these data sovereignty protocols that are controlled by the tribe. And I'll just close that now that the governor of California here has just signed an executive order about 2 weeks ago supporting, embracing culturally based fire. We've been working with the policymakers on opening up space to create protection for practitioners, liability coverage. The executive order directs the Air Board to work on modeling cultural smoke models now for cultural burning support, because smoke is a treatment and actually ceremonial uses, and then also recognizing the status of cultural knowledge bearers, and they're leading this work. And then finally, I'll just wrap up. This partnership has been endorsed. We just recently received funding from CAL FIRE, $1.2 million, and another $950,000 grant from CalWorks to support the scaling of this work with our 5 other tribe partners. And so we're going to be working with Shingle Springs Band of Miwok, Colfax Cloud Valley Consolidated Tribe, the Cache Creek Conservancy, and the Owens Valley Indian Water Commission, which is a collection of 5 tribes in the Owens Valley area, which is on the Great Basin side of the Sierra Nevada. I know there's a lot to talk about. I could just listen to Pedro by myself all day long, and so I really appreciate being included in this panel and the knowledge that's being shared. And I guess sorry for taking up too much time if I did. So thank you. And then I'll leave the rest for Mr. Moore when we get into the Q&A part, and then also talking about scale solutions. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. I'm learning so much from each of the panelists, and we have a wonderful spread of geography. Um, so we'll jump into the first question of the discussion section of the webinar. Co-production is often described as the process of braiding traditional knowledge with Western science. There are some good examples and plenty of not so great efforts. Can you talk about your process of contributing to or co-producing knowledge? For example, what to be cognizant of, data sovereignty considerations. How do you communicate sensitive information? First, we'll hear from Pedro.
Pedro, ahí para que puedas responder la pregunta de Carissa.
A ver, ¿qué pregunta es?
Ah,
Perdón.
Perdón, estaba muteado, disculpe. Señor Pedro, la pregunta es, ¿puede hablar sobre su proceso de coproducción de conocimiento? ¿Qué consejos o advertencias podría dar al respecto?
Bueno, sí, a ver, déjeme, bueno, lo que hemos estado haciendo es lo que ya expliqué en las láminas, es apoyar el conocimiento tradicional indígena sobre manejo del fuego, incorporando el conocimiento técnico que hacemos los especialistas, pero más agregando la ciencia moderna.
So just as I explained in my slides, I strongly believe that we should support traditional indigenous knowledge using the technological knowledge we have right now, but also leveraging modern science.
Bueno, y con esto pretendemos fortalecer esas capacidades comunitarias indígenas para que ellos avancen más sobre este conocimiento y bueno, el uso y manejo del fuego sea para ellos una alternativa de vida.
And with this, we want to strengthen the capabilities they already have so they can make progress, so they can use and manage fire as a way of life.
Y por último, bueno, estamos con muchas expectativas de que a través del gran desafío del fuego se pueda sostener este proceso que ya iniciamos desde hace más de 20 años. Entonces tenemos esa esperanza.
And our hope and our expectation is that this process that we've been working for the past 20 years can continue because of this Grand Fire Challenge.
Bueno, eso sería por lo pronto.
That will be all from my side.
Thank you. Joel, would you like to jump in?
Oh, I would say from my perspective, from my tribe, in Western Montana, the Confederate Salish Kootenai tribe, and my father's from the Fort Peck tribe from Northeast Montana. So, and then now I currently, work for the Kalispel tribe. I would say that there are so many tribes across the United States, with the nations, and every tribe is unique. So it's hard for me to speak on every tribe across the nation of United States. I can only speak on the interaction with my elders and those that I have burned with in my current position. Um, I have not been in fire my whole life, on my career. 10 years with the Kalispel tribe, I was a wildlife biologist. In the last 3 years, I have now taken on the fire and fuels role, being a RXP2, burn boss, firing boss, engine boss, and doing it all by one person. I have a fire effects monitor that I recently hired. So that's my staff, to try to get fire on the ground. So, I would say working with innovators or folks outside of the Kalispel tribe and making sure that data sovereignty is at the forefront on how they would like the story to be told or how they would appreciate the data that's being shared or not. Um, I have other tribes within the Northwest region to definitely fall back on, with them being involved in fire a lot many more years in suppression um, standpoint versus cultural burning. I think we're trying to figure it out. I think California is 10 years ahead of us, it feels like, with the state of California supporting cultural burning with the northern tribes. California is, I always like to say, California is different from the rest of us in the states because they already have that support from the government and the state approval of doing things. Um, we're trying to get there in state of Washington. We're trying to get there in the Northwest region. Um, I feel like one thing that hurt us across the nation here in the United States is the Smokey the Bear of only you can prevent forest fires. That basically told our my ancestors to stop burning. It took it away from us, and that break from my great grandfather burning on a regular basis to where I am now and where my children are. There's such a huge gap in the comfort level and the knowledge of the importance of fire. It's not only for getting rid of the fuels in the woods. We use fire for so many other reasons that we probably talk for a half hour of the reason other things that the Salish people use fire in Northwest Montana. So I think seeing all the innovators and all the companies and all the partnerships over this past year has been really eye-opening of all the good work that we're doing to try to get more fire on the landscape.
Teresa, you're muted.
Thank you so much. I'm sure Matt Moore has a great follow-up to that discussion.
Sure. Good morning. Yeah, Matthew Moore. I'm a Nissan Washoe. I have a background. Well, I'm like I mentioned, or somebody mentioned, I'm program executive with Indigenous Futures. But I come with a background in fire suppression. That was my career for 25 years. It started with hand crews and worked local, state, federal, and ended up with the city department and kind of circled back around. And after retiring, I got into tribal preservation, which led me to a different career path, I guess, which I worked as a tribal historic preservation officer for my tribe for 9 years. So coupling those two backgrounds and on top of that, the traditional knowledge that was handed down to me, um, just using all that and really kind of using those strengths of, all those put together and really helped me do my job as a TIPO. And also coming from a suppression background, seeing all the negative effects from aggressive firefighting here in California over the years and how that has led to a critical fuels situation that we see on the landscape to the point now where, fires are becoming not just devastating, but deadly, more routinely. And, these weather changes too, you see, a lot more wind events, more increased winds that we used to see, and couple that with the fuels. One small fire can turn into, what we're seeing in, million acres plus these days. And there's really no methods of suppression in modern day that can really do anything to either slow or stop these fires. And, that was only created because we just ignored the land, and a lot of laws were passed that took our ability as Native people to be the guardians and the stewards of the land through our practices, thousands of years of burning the land, kept us safe. It kept us healthy. It kept everything healthy. Kept our water clean, kept our plant communities and proper spacing and organization. And we didn't have fuels on the landscape like we see. Therefore, there weren't devastation, when it comes to fire. It was more in the form of good fire, intentional fire that was used to enhance our resources. Thousands of years. I mean, the technology and knowledge speaks for itself. When the first explorers came to California, they were noticing those things, the changes of the landscape and how manicured and pristine things were. They mentioned it being like a park setting. But over the years, as we know, things were done and laws were put in place that took the native hands off the land. And that was just the beginning of, what we ended up with today. And today, now that we're recognizing the situation, I think, we're gaining some ground when it comes to education and not just our age within our state, but, the public as well. There's a real gain momentum when it comes to wanting to apply fire. But there's still some resistance because people just haven't been educated on the topic properly, I think, because fortunately, they see the news and see the extreme results of something that should have never happened in the first place. And I don't think enough people understand that fire was a tool, and it wasn't just a tool, but it was a kind of a element that touched everything within our lives, in our culture, our language, ceremony, our health, our diet, everything, hinges on fire. I'll kind of veer a little bit. In the past few years, we've been really seeing that need for developing more crews that are able to get out on the landscapes, not just tribal lands, and working on, say, sacred lands or archaeological sites through the Forest Service or other agencies. through consultation, having the ability to have more access to get out and do this type of work, bringing in these young individuals who have been trained up to firefighter status, but they're bringing in all their traditional ecological knowledge, all that their language, their traditional skills, their in their own rights, they're native plant specialists. And you know, you don't see crews designed like that. In many ways, you can't take a suppression crew and turn them into a restoration or a fields crew to that nature, to that level. And having the ability to bring those people that are bringing that energy and willing to gain that relationship back with the land, you know, that connection, that relationship, and all that good energy has been missing for a very, very long time. And that's why we see so much not healthy forest, let's just say. And then, you know, when our landscape's not healthy, that trickles down to our people. And we're seeing that too. But we're identifying these situations and actively trying to reverse these, not just with hand crews, but by creating a group of nation builders, young individuals who are basically on that path. And it's not just landscape level stuff. It's, you know, language. It's bringing back community, traditional foods, talk about food sovereignty, all these things that's going to be needed to really kind of rebuild our communities and back to our indigenous ways. And if we do that through diet, you know, we can bring back health and see a lot of these diseases taper off, let's just say. And I'll just say, you know, in many ways, a lot of this work is also it's healing work, and it's very positive and cleansing in many ways. You know, we all carry a lot of baggage, let's just say, from external sources. And, you know, this kind of work just really lets you just let all that go and, you know, reconnect not just with yourself, but, you know, with creator and the land and your ancestors. And, you know, that just really, things really start to come together when you get to that level. So, you know, through my position, working through nonprofits and, you know, applying that and then, you know, getting more of these younger people in hand crews developed, not just here in our area, but throughout the Sierra Nevadas, doing the same type of work, providing jobs, training, experience. They're applying knowledge. We're incorporating technology by using apps like OpsReady. So they have in their hands a platform that they can actually do surveys. They can do plant identification. They've worked with El Dorado National Forest with native plant vegetation mapping, identification, post-fire type work. And we're looking to expand all that. So, you know, for us, the non-invasive advanced technology is critical in how we not just record and store data. And as we know, the sovereignty issue is very critical. But having the tribes given the ability to take that information and hold that for themselves and be able to share what they want to share, you know, what they deem as sensitive or what should be public facing type knowledge. I know for our group, we're actually going to work on something called a knowledge basket, which you can put in things like, you know, stories or knowledge that is intent to be taught for educational purposes. And because not all our stories and lessons are geared towards just our tribal people. This is for all humans, really, when you think about it. It applies to all. So, you know, that kind of information should be out there, especially when it comes to how do we take care of our land? How do we bring it back? What do we do about the fuels? And what kind of methods are required that's not actually doing damage while you're doing it. We see a lot of the heavy equipment, mechanized treatments on our landscape, and actually literally right next to some of our project treatment areas. And it was shocking for these people to literally look at the difference and see what it's supposed to look like versus something that, say, a contractor came in and did. And it's night and day. I mean, there's healthy and then there's sick. And even though the fuels were in their mind treated, all they did was convert aerial fuels onto ground fuels, which is, equally as bad in our opinion. So we really want to see fire reintroduced, and everything that we do has that thought in mind that when we leave that place, we're going to come back and burn it at some point, whether it's pile burning initially, which leads to hopefully broadcast burning at some point. We really got to get on the fuels issues here in this state before we can really return back to cultural burning in its true form. But in the meantime, you're going to see a lot of hybrid methods using traditional ecological knowledge coupled with some modern day equipment, non-invasive equipment, meaning people with hand tools and chainsaws. That's, our level. Our crew's probably 75%, they've been trained up to Sawyer level. So again, you don't see too many crews that are set up in that fashion. But yeah, it's just kind of, they're really, it's all about, right now it's fuels, but it's also meadow restoration and some of the work that we're doing with some other organizations in the Sierras. That's what they're doing. They're restoring meadows and bringing back floodplains and seasonal flooding areas, all in our restoration efforts. So that's, that's kind of where I'm at and what I do and what we're currently doing. And there's so much more. I mean, there's just a lot to talk about when it comes to these things, but I guess in a nutshell, it's kind of what we do.
Wow. Thank you for that answer. I really enjoy it. I can just listen to you talk forever. Um, you can tell that you're a wealth of knowledge, especially in the field. Um, in the chat, Pedro has been, oh, thank you, Matt. In the chat, Pedro has been sharing about the differences of fire management in Mexico versus the US and Canada. I was wondering if you could speak to the um, the dynamics with indigenous communities, the differences in Mexico versus in the US and Canada.
Señor Pedro, usted comentó acerca de las diferencias en cómo se tratan estos temas en México, Estados Unidos y Canadá. Desde su experiencia, ¿cómo difiere la gestión del fuego y la custodia indígena en estos países, México frente a Estados Unidos y Canadá?
Pedro, estás
Sí.
muteado.
Señor Pedro, está muteado.
Perdón,
Ahora
¿se
sí.
escucha?
Sí.
Sí, gracias. Bueno, en México el uso tradicional del fuego a través del conocimiento indígena se realiza para preparar terrenos para la agricultura, queman pastizales para la ganadería, es decir, son alternativas económicas de vida para la gente del campo.
In Mexico, traditionally, they use fire, indigenous knowledge to prepare lands for agriculture. It's part of the tradition they have in order to prepare things for the crops.
Bueno, y en este caso, ellos tienen conocimientos profundos de patrones locales con respecto al clima, la vegetación, que les sirve como guía para que ellos, usando su conocimiento tradicional, efectúen las quemas con el mayor cuidado, de manera muy adecuada.
So in this case, they have a really, really deep knowledge on the climate situation of the land, the vegetation of the land. So they use this as guidelines so they can perform these burns without actually damaging the ecosystem.
Bueno, y seguramente en Canadá, Estados Unidos, quemen pastizales, pero tal vez con otros fines. Yo sé que en la historia lo han hecho, por ejemplo, en algunos lugares para atraer la presencia del bisonte y puedan cazar con fines de alimenticios.
So I know that perhaps Canada and the US performed burns with different purposes. For example, I know that they do that in order to attract the presence of bisons, so they can hunt them. I believe that those are some of the main differences.
Sin embargo, cada país tiene sus formas propias de usar y manejar el fuego. Eso está muy claro, ¿no?
However,
Tal vez, gracias, sí, adelante.
However, I know that it's really clear that each country has its own way to manage fire.
Sin embargo, en México tenemos un problema de una brecha intergeneracional, es decir, por el fenómeno de la migración, los jóvenes se están yendo de su lugar de origen y los viejos se están quedando, los papás, pues, y ya no hay a quien le enseñen ese conocimiento tradicional.
However, in Mexico, we're having an issue of intergenerational gap because of the migration that is taking place. So young people are going to the cities, and the elders don't have anyone to teach all their knowledge to.
Bueno, y otra diferencia que es parte del manejo del fuego son las causas de los incendios. En México, la mayoría de causas es por actividades antropogénicas, lo que hace la gente pues cotidianamente cuando usa el fuego.
And another difference is that what actually causes fire here in Mexico, most of the cases are caused by men, by humans.
Y a diferencia de Estados Unidos y Canadá, que las causas del fuego o de incendios es por descargas eléctricas.
And unlike the case of Canada and Mexico, the causes are mostly electric discharges.
Sin embargo, la mayor diferencia que identifico es la mayor aplicación de financiamiento, recursos económicos para el proceso de manejo del fuego en Canadá y Estados Unidos con respecto a México.
However, the biggest difference I see it's the funding. The funding that this type of issues like fire management has in Mexico. Perdón, I'm sorry, in the U.S. and in Canada. It's very different from our case here in Mexico.
Bueno, y este financiamiento establece la mayor diferencia porque donde hay financiamiento permite desarrollar mayor tecnología, pues, ¿no? Los procesos de manejo del fuego se fortalecen en todos sus niveles.
So the main thing funding actually plays an important role is in that where there is more funding, there can actually be more and better technology, and that actually helps you in many ways.
Bueno, de ahí que en este proceso del gran desafío del fuego, lo que pretendemos como organización local, como Biomasa y bueno, incluyendo a la Iniciativa Internacional de Manejo del Fuego, es diseñar y crear un esquema de apoyos e incentivos para que fortalezcan la economía de las poblaciones indígenas que hacen uso del fuego.
So what we are aiming to with this Grand Fire Challenge is, as Biomasa, we want to design and create an incentive and support system so people can actually make profits with their fire management.
De esta forma, nos va a permitir sostener en el tiempo la participación de los pueblos originarios y rurales haciendo un mejor uso y manejo del fuego cada día.
This is going to allow us to sustain the participation of these communities in order to have a better performance managing these issues.
Muchísimas
Gracias.
Pedro. Justo, muchísimas gracias, Pedro, por todo el conocimiento que nos has traído el día de hoy. Lian, creo que vamos ahora contigo, ¿me parece?
Sounds good. Thank you so much. And I think that's a really great note to end on, Pedro, talking about the work that you're doing and how it's tied with the challenge. And really great to see the differences, as we were saying, across all the finalists. And there's so much potential learning there. And so I'll say thank you so much, everybody, for joining. We really appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate how you supported the finalists. And please, if there's anybody in the chat or on the panel today that you'd like to connect with or with our team, please reach out and let us know. And I'd like to give a huge thank you as well to Caressa for putting together this panel and moderating. So please request to join for the Solution Summit event in Oakland in January. We'll also have a virtual pitch day in December. Reach out to us if you're interested in that. And one more huge thank you to all the panelists. And thank you for the great work that you're doing on the ground.
Oh, thank you for the time.
Get out.
Bye, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Gracias, Pedro. Hasta luego.
Thank you, Pedro.
Everyone.
Hasta luego. Gracias.
Thank you, Ryan.
Hasta luego,
Bye,
gracias.
Edgar.
Bye bye now.
Bye-bye.